So now we're about to read the last bit of our report. Now, those of you who are savvy computer readers are going to say, wait a minute, how could it be the last part of the report? If you look over here at the scroll bar, we've barely scratched the surface. So let me just preface with this last bit called the intake spreadsheet takes up the bulk. If you were to print this out, for example, most of the pages would be the intake spreadsheet. And that's because it provides you the most detail on your nutrients. What do I mean by that? If you look up here where it says intake spreadsheet, right below, it gives us the date of March the 27th, 2019. So this is no longer giving us averages. It's not giving us aggregated data. It's breaking everything down as much as possible. So, for example, it's giving us, when we look at this left-hand column, right, where we're talking about our categories, it's actually showing you every food that I entered for that day. And I have a lot of entries, right? Now, some of you guys won't have that many entries, in part because even before COVID, I tended to eat most of my meals at home, and I made them myself. So my breakfast, if you look at my breakfast list, you say, oh my goodness gracious, what is this person eating, right? But if you look really carefully and break it down, what you're going to see is I'm having coffee with milk in it, and I'm having some kind of a breakfast tortilla. But since I made it myself, all the ingredients are in there and they're listed separately. It's definitely more tedious to do that way, but it gives you better information because now look on the other side. It tells me what meal I had it for, right? And it looks like I actually messed up. I didn't have this for breakfast. That's lunch. But anyway, never mind. Over here, it gives you how much I said I ate of these things or consumed. And again, I refer you back to the information your instructor has given you about portion sizes. It's going to give me weight. I don't really care about that. And it's going to give me, they're going to call kcal, stands for kilocalories, or another way of saying calories. So it's going to, and if we look down, it's going to give me, next it's going to give me all the same food, same day. It's going to break it down food by food. Protein, carbs, fat. It's going to give me the saturated fat. It's going to give me the monounsaturated fat, the polyunsaturated fat. And you see on and on and on. And that's why this report is so long. Because it's a huge spreadsheet. It's giving me every nutrient for every food for every day. Take that in. It's giving me every nutrient for every food for every day. If you try to take all that in, you are going to be overwhelmed. So I ask you not to do that, but pick something you're interested in. Let's say I'm going to go to the bottom of this day, and I know how this is organized, so this is easier for me to do. And I'm going to look at sodium. I'm going to look at my sodium right here in this column for March the 27th. I didn't stress this with you guys, but I went over on my sodium a little bit. And I need to worry about that. Everybody needs to worry about that because high sodium is linked to high blood pressure. But I especially need to worry about it because my dad and his mom all had high blood pressure. My brother has high blood pressure. It runs in my family. So I have to be careful about that. So the way I can use this particular report for sodium, say, let me make it a little smaller so we can see the whole column. So here's all of my food for that whole day and the sodium. Here's my sodium, this column here. And I run down here. I can locate what foods gave me the most sodium. And I can decide, is that something that I want to just ditch from my diet in order to get my sodium down? Is that something I want to eat less of in order to ditch from my diet? Is that something I want to modify in some way, either buy a low sodium version of it or make my own with less sodium? The other thing that's really interesting about this column and looking at it food by food is you might find some super surprising information. If you look carefully at this, My two highest sources of sodium, you probably already started looking at them. My single highest source of sodium is right here, 581. Well, this shouldn't surprise you. Surprise anybody. It came from salt, right? That's one of the number one sources of sodium. But a pretty close second, almost 550, came from bread. You can start to educate yourself about what foods have what in them if you just start paying attention to your spreadsheets. And what's good about that, instead of looking at kind of general abstract lists, is, if I look up sodium, it's going to tell me bacon is a big source. Well, I don't eat bacon. That doesn't help me. It's not going to tell me that my Indian flatbread is giving me my sodium, but this does, right? Similarly, we could look at something protective, right? I'm going to tell you potassium without going into a whole lot of detail because you'll learn more about this in chapters 8 and 11, which you can read ahead if you want to. Potassium plays an opposite role to sodium. Potassium protects me against high blood pressure. So I want to boost that. So I can scan this list for my highest sources of potassium, and I can decide, do I want more of those? I also start to educate myself, right? As you scan this list for me, can you see what my single highest source of potassium is? I'll give you a hint, it's not bananas, is it? It's milk. My highest single numbers for potassium are milk. And I know a lot of you guys don't drink milk, but here's a reason too. In addition to the calcium, in addition to the vitamin D, in addition to the protein if you're low in protein, potassium. Who knew? Right? So this one, you really, really, really want to start breaking that down for yourself. Dive into it, and this is my advice. Dive into this part of the report when you really feel like you've got some intellectual energy. And don't focus on the whole thing. Pick one or two nutrients and look very carefully and look at all 3 days and just start looking for the patterns. Do not try to memorize a whole bunch of stuff and do not try to grasp the whole thing. Little by little, step by step. That is my absolute best advice for this entire report. It's huge, it's massive, but it's valuable. You might even, because you're not going to have access to diet and wellness once the semester's over, you might even want to enter way more than 3 days. Enter a week, enter 2 weeks, enter a month, enter 3 days every week for the whole semester. Generate yourself a bunch of data and then generate a bunch of 3-day averages. You can only do 3 days on this one. So if you've got 12 days, you'll need 4 reports to cover all 12 days. And save them on computer. Don't print them out, they're too big, but save them on your computer for your future reference. In my judgment, this right here is the most valuable thing that you will take away from this class. Way more valuable than the 3 credits of a general education science. Not to minimize that, but this is stuff that you can take away that make your life better forever. So, just to remind you, this is Professor Gossage. I'm climbing off my soapbox now. I will leave you to your reports. I hope these videos have been helpful, and I wish you guys all the best this semester.